actually announced, it's officially called.
That's right. That's right. Well, as I told Marty, I mean, this is it. I'm down to my last layer, so I'm going to have to do something different, or we're going to have to bundle up and we can cool the room down. So anyway, all right. Let's see. All right. We're going to start looking at David the soldier this morning. We're going to start with the David and Goliath story in 1 Samuel 17. Of course, if you have any announcements, jot those down on a card in front of you and give those to Marty after class. He will have announcements before service starts. And so right now, let's start with a word of prayer. We'll let Miss Anna get set down. Come on in, lady. All right, let's pray. Almighty God, we come before you this morning and we thank you for this opportunity and this time to come together and study your word. We pray that this study will be pleasing to your ear in accordance in your word, and that it will be beneficial to us as we continue to grow in our faith and our relationship with you, and we try to adopt and achieve the heart of David that is pleasing to you, Father. And we just pray all these things in your Son's name. Amen. David and Goliath. Opening comments in general. Anything about David and his battle with Goliath?
Little man, big faith.
Say again?
Little man, big faith.
Little man, big faith. Very good. What else?
In power for today, yesterday, it went the extent with David and Goliath. It was really interesting.
In power for today from yesterday.
Yesterday, the 13th.
Anything else? Why did he carry 5 stones? Okay. And I don't know that I have the answer to that. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. Somebody else might come out too. Very good. Okay.
Goliath did have 4 other brothers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So there was 4 brothers that Goliath had. Okay. So that we might have figured that out. Okay.
It was a decent shot. I'd carry home bag with me.
Absolutely. He was a really good shot. We tend to stockpile a little more ammunition these days. What else? Okay, so we're going to, the author makes a good point here, and Josh has been making this point as we study Revelations on Wednesday night. It's wise to approach a study of inspired text through the eyes of the writer or through the eyes of the one to whom it was written. We should not always view matters through 21st century glasses. And so we're going to break this down this morning, and we're going to run through the eyes of David's father, through the eyes of young David, through the eyes of Goliath and David's brothers, observers, people like that. Even the eyes of King Saul. So as we go through the Goliath this morning, we're going to look at all these different points of view. So we've got David's father, Jesse. I think I'm pronouncing that right. All right. Obviously, he was concerned about his 3 older sons who were at the battle with Saul. They were serving in Saul's army. So he sent David up to check on them. He took provisions for those 3 older brothers to see, just make sure how things were going, make sure everybody was okay. Really so he really had no idea what was about to happen. He obviously wasn't there to witness it. And so Jesse just really had kind of that general concern that any parent does when, you know, their children are off to battle. That was an interesting thought to me, just that, hey, we can run over here and check on our family who's in a battle. That's not, we can't do that today. That's a little, thank goodness, that's a little bit more of a feat if you want to check on somebody in battle.
But Chris, battles are different, because I think about some of the things that our kids do go through here now,
Okay?
peer pressure, those kinds of things, and we do check in with our teachers and different things
Okay.
to check on our kids, even, you know, locally in a battle.
Excellent point. Excellent point. So she's saying that we still as parents today probably do this with the battles our children face on a daily basis. You know, at school, peer pressure, whatever, struggling in class, the different things that they face, keeping up with their technology usage and whatever. So that's an excellent point that, yeah, we still have those battles here local today. And of course, I mean,
Not to the scale this.
that's right. You know, not a war battle, but it's still that same mentality. Absolutely. Excellent point. Anything else from David's father? Any other thoughts? All right. So the eyes of young David. Obviously, he was following the instructions of his father when he went to see his brothers and to carry provisions. And he gets out here and he hears the Goliath in his daily or twice a day call, asking for a challenge. And the author here talks about David immediately realizing the humiliation and disgrace brought upon Israel, and how he was just disgracing God's people and God's army. With what he was doing, the challenge he was throwing out there, and that nobody was answering that call. We think about how young David was at this time. He says here we often think of him as a young teenager, but likely he was probably a little older than that. But still a young man, especially compared to Goliath. Goliath had been in battle countless times. Goliath, they say, was 8 to 10 feet in height. And so, 8 to 10 feet to any of us is still going to be very large. But to a middle to older teenager, this is a pretty big difference between the two that we have here. He goes on to compare it to, which this is extremely exaggerant, but standing at the base of the arch in St. Louis, or a flea to a dog, or something like that. That outstanding size difference between the two. We do know that David was able to put on the king's armor. Now he ended up taking it off and refusing it. So he was, big enough to at least put on and hold up Saul's armor, but was not practiced with it and knew it was going to hinder him.
Chris, one point that came out, and this was not about his father or David himself, but his older brother Elias' reaction to him reminded me of Joseph, and how his older brothers were jealous because of his father's favor for David, for Joseph. And apparently, all the other brothers had been overlooked
Yeah.
by David, by God, by Samuel, so there was apparently some jealousy there. It's like, what are you doing here? Why are you even speaking?
Absolutely. And we're going to get to the brothers. So strictly from David's point of view right now, obviously he had faced beasts, bears and lions, when defending his father's sheep herd, and had chased them down and killed them. I mean, that right there in itself is, I wouldn't want to do that with modern technology, I don't think, not too up close and personal. And you know, he's obviously killing them with his bare hands. What do you think about David's mentality? I mean, obviously something moved him in his mind to take this challenge, and there's no concern. Any thoughts on that?
One thing, as soon as David was anointed by Samuel, it said the Spirit of the Lord came on him in power.
Mm-hmm.
He had God's Spirit
Absolutely.
right there with him.
Absolutely.
Gave him confidence.
So some divine intervention and direction there from David's part.
And he recognized it. This is the Lord who rescued me from the fall of the lion and the bear.
Yes,
And rescued me.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, very confident in what God was going to do, you know, and was capable of doing. Absolutely. Absolutely. It was not a challenge too big.
I think about, when you talk about the sling, we should not underestimate it,
Okay?
because they had, I think there was 10,000 Danites that could use either hand with the sling and split a hair with it. Now, we're talking about serious business.
That's right.
So one thing we need to always think of not only God's help, but also what he had practiced with.
Mm-hmm.
And when he used as a young man, he had professional ability.
Was well versed in the weaponry he was carrying. Absolutely. And you know, and you compare that to today. You know, your most elite military and law enforcement practice with both hands. They can shoot with their offhand. Most people never practice, you know, having to shoot with their offhand. And so, as Kelly said, in that time, the best of the best could use that sling with both hands and split a hair with it. And so, yeah, this wasn't just the first time he'd picked up a sling and a stone and tried to do something with it. It was very, very well versed. Absolutely.
And it was a thing he was confident with.
Oh, yeah.
He done it enough that he didn't have a problem, whereas the kings, all that regalia, he didn't probably know how to fasten the front,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think they said a professional practices until they get it right, but an expert practices until they can't get it wrong. And so that was the level that he was at with this sling and these stones was at that expert level. Absolutely.
Chris, I think it goes back to last week when we was talking about David's characteristics. He was driven, you know, with faith, driven in what he did, confident in himself, confident in what the Lord could do.
Mm-hmm.
This is what made David David. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's why he was after man's own heart. I mean, you know, it was God's own heart. It was the man he was.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, the eyes of Goliath. Goliath was a survivor of the well-known race of Anak from Numbers 13 to 28. He was from Gath. And he was, of course, a very aggressive, militant, challenging.
This challenge has been going on 40 days.
Absolutely, absolutely. This was not this was not a brand new deal. We've been listening to this every day, multiple times a day, like you say, for 40 days.
You had a pretty good deal with him. He said, you beat me and you will become your.
That's right. Only one person needs to die.
Yeah.
Either me or your challenger, and this will be over. Absolutely. You know, that's a lot of confidence, and that's probably easier for that statue of a person to have that level of confidence, which I think is some of the point of the story here. You know, in the battles that we face that seem to be that daunting. You know, do we have the faith that David had in this situation? Of course, he was used to being that daunting force, you know, that just nobody wanted to challenge. Obviously, he believed he would be victorious. I'm sure he had been victorious many times before. He was angry when David came before him.
He was
What?
insulted.
That's right. He was insulted. What is this? We've got a young man, no armor,
Yeah.
no sword, no spear. You know, Goliath had a shield bearer with him. You know, it was, and this kid comes out with a sling. You know, what is this? This is, you know, this is beneath me. This is unworthy of the challenge that I have thrown before you.
It shows the difference between David's faith and Saul's faith.
Okay.
The Spirit of the Lord had departed from Saul.
Mhm.
Same thing with us today.
Yeah.
It says the Lord, and everything seems lost and.
Yeah. That's what you're saying. So we're seeing the difference in the spirit and the faith that David had compared to Saul. You know, that the spirit had left Saul, and you know, that's when we're trying to do things on our own at that point. And it's obviously a lot more of a struggle, and we're trying to figure it out versus just turning that over and letting him show us what needs to be done.
And we talk about Goliath, he was there for self-glory, David was
Okay.
the glory of God.
Okay, very good. Goliath was for self-glory, and David was there for the glory of God. God's people had been insulted. Absolutely. All right, so now to the brothers, David's older brothers. So obviously at this time, like we've talked about, the Israelites were a lot of mistakes and misleads that had led to the present time in history, include their failure to trust Jehovah. They were alienated from Him. Their lives demonstrated blatant disobedience. Their faithless leader begot faithless followers. And so we get down here to David's brothers. Of course, they're afraid of Goliath. They haven't gone out to face him. Everybody's paralyzed by that fear. Let's see, what verse are we? 28, where we're talking about the...
Yeah. Start with the oldest brother.
Eliab, his eldest brother, heard what he spoke to the men. He was angered and kindled against David, and he said, "Why have you come down, and with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your presumption and the evil of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle." David said, "What have I done now? Was it not but a word?" And he turned away from him toward another and spoke in the same way, and the people answered him again as before. So yeah, there was some dissension there from his brother, just because he was asking questions. Accuses him of coming down to spectate and see what's going on.
I read into that there was jealousy. I mean, the brothers were present.
Mhm.
David was anointed, in fact,
Okay,
they were passed over.
right.
The little
So already some jealousy and dissension.
They call him conceited.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
If David had acted different toward him after his anointing.
Right.
We know Joseph had all his dreams that he told his brothers about, so,
Sure.
but I don't know if David had done anything like that.
Yeah, we don't know David's interactions, before this with his brothers.
Lust and jealousy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Wonder what the age difference was. That interaction kind of reminds me of when I would be at Brad's house and we were dating. His dad would be at work, and some of the smaller kids would be acting up or something, and she'd go, Brad, which meant, okay, it's your turn to act like the daddy, take care of this.
That's right. Okay. Okay. So yeah, maybe there was a considerable, age gap, and they had to take care of things, and like
a child.
yeah, absolutely. Older brothers treating David more like a child.
And maybe they were embarrassed for David to witness what was going on, their cowardness, or whatever.
And that's what the author goes in here and kind of finishes with is, how dare my brother come along and say he would fight the giant when we've been out here all this time. Now there may even be some shame that, well, why don't we have the nerve and the faith to go out there against him when this young lad is going to come in from the sheep fields and say, at least go out there,
And Saul's leadership kind of trickled down to his men.
Yeah.
His men maybe took his cue from Saul, and if he was afraid, so the whole army was afraid.
Absolutely. Well, and that's an excellent point. Leadership does trickle down. I mean, that the depending on especially how open the leadership is, it absolutely trickles down and affects.
Experienced military men, and they won many battles
Yeah,
before.
that's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, when the leader is afraid to go out and to lead that charge, everybody else is going to be the same way. Absolutely. Absolutely. So through the eyes of the observers, so anybody else, observing this, of course, this is taking place in land that belonged to the tribe of Judah. The Philistines were on one mountain, and the armies of gods were on the other. So there was a valley between these two encampments. We've got this, some sort of a stream that there's a lot of these worn pebbles in this natural barrier between the two mountains. And basically we've got a stalemate. They've got these two armies out here. They've been there for a while, and nothing is going on. There's absolutely no fellowship or anything between these two camps. We've got two opposing masters that they're serving. And so at this time, I think we see the hand of God actually, gradually introducing young David and preparing him for what was to come. When you really just look at this from an observation standpoint,
In verse 37, when Saul had told David that, he couldn't go out and do that because he was too young. In verse 37, it says, the Lord who has rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of the Philistines. So, David had no doubt that
Absolutely.
he would come out,
Absolutely. That's it. That's right. And we see the work that he'd already done in defending the sheep herd and the flock. And so he knew what was capable. Absolutely. Absolutely.
The king didn't believe in him, and his brothers and the rest of them didn't believe him, but David believed in
Yeah.
himself because he knew the Lord would take care of him.
That's right. And yeah, the rest of his countrymen had lost that level of faith and trust. Absolutely.
And we talked about Goliath being insulted, that little David was gonna come attack him, but David was insulted because this Philistine man was gonna,
Hmm.
thought he could, overpower God's army.
Right.
God's army was not actually God's army at the time, but David certainly was.
His final thought here on this part is compare the distinct lines between God's people and the world of darkness. Separation should exist between these two opposite extremes. We must not extend fellowship to the unfruitful works of darkness. And so he kind of uses this as an example. This clear separation between these two camps, is what we should have as the church between the unfruitful works of the world. Obviously, if people want to come from the darkness, absolutely, we welcome with open arms, but there should be no intermixing of the two. All right, through the eyes of King Saul.
One more thing on.
Yeah, go ahead.
From outside people looking at it, just think about the mindset of the Philistines that were sitting on the hillside, and they're sending Goliath down there, and they're like, we got this made, we just sit back and wait, we're gonna gain all this stuff. We just sit here and wait however long it takes. Then on the other side of it, the Israelites are like, this little boy's gonna go out there and I'm gonna be a slave for these people. He's losing everything, and that's where the brothers like embarrassing.
Yeah,
Like, our kin is gonna give up Israel to the Philistines.
that's right. You're going to go out here and make us all a slave.
You said that, but you just think the mindset of
Yeah.
different groups sitting there looking forward.
When you say that, the Philistines remind me of guys we served with that always had a problem forgetting their equipment. And these guys probably just left it at home because we got Goliath. We don't need it. We're not. And of course, after this was done, they were pursued and slayed, and they may not have had what they needed to defend themselves at that point. And yeah, that's a good point as far as David and his people is. You're just fixing to go out here and I mean, right now we're nobody's slave because we're not going out to the battle, but you're going to go out here and get yourself killed, and we're all going to be doomed to serve the Philistines. Good point. Excellent point. All right, King Saul. So obviously the king's men have rejected the possibility of fighting against Goliath. King was aware of this and the threats and what he probably saw as a hopeless situation. He even offered sizable rewards for anybody who would go out and face Goliath, but nobody's done that. Obviously, David has asked, what specifically is going to happen to one who kills Goliath? So he has inquired about this reward and was informed of it. That's right. So let's go back here. And the king will enrich the man who kills him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. So so we're promised wealth. We're promised to marry the king's daughter, and your household will be free within the country of Israel. So pretty big rewards put on this for anyone willing to go do this. Now, I guess you had to be successful to receive that reward, because if you're not, we're all fixing to be slaves. And so he was at the point he wasn't even being picky about who he sent out. He's not looking for his absolute best warrior, it doesn't sound like. It sounds like he's just looking for anybody who's willing to try to go out and take on this challenge. So obviously, Saul expresses doubt when David comes before him. And then, as we've talked about, David offers his past accomplishments, the killing of the lion and the bear, and just the fact that this is going to be God's victory and God's power that's going to deliver this situation. So Saul basically has the same doubt and the same concern that everybody else does. He does offer his armor. He says, if you're going to go out there and do this, you're going to go out there and get yourself killed, at least take my armor. And so we see that conversation that David would not go with the armor and with the weapons because he had not proved them. So he had not trained with this weight and with these weapons that they were carrying. That's something that, the military does just constantly. I've heard something about how much we spend just on training compared to other countries to stay prepared. And I remember when we were at Fort Hood and we were training to go into Iraq back in 2006. My traps had never hurt so bad in my life. And we were issued body armor with the plates, and we're walking around and it's just hanging on you all day. And so it's just, there is that time that if you're gonna wear that sort of equipment, and if you're going to, as we've talked about the sling, David's well versed. The other soldiers are well versed with their swords and with their spears. You don't want to just run into a situation like that with something you've never tried before or wearing something you've never worn before. And the equipment is different for different groups depending on what you do in combat. And so he was proven with his sling and the clothes that he wore every day, and that's what he went in with. So also points out here, David was a man of humility, and he did not feel worthy to wear the king's armor. So this isn't just anybody's armor. This is the armor of King Saul. This isn't his brother's armor or a shield bearer or anybody else. This is the king's armor. And so we do see David's humility, that he also just doesn't feel worthy to wear the armor of the king. What do you think about David's thoughts as he met Goliath on the battlefield? Total confident. Okay?
And Goliath, he's talking about how he's going to kill him and feed him to the wild animals. And David said that you come against me with the sword, the spear, and the javelin, but I come against you to the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel. And he basically just told him, he says that this day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcass of the Philistine army to the birds and wild animals. So, he just went up there totally confident. You're going to tell someone that they're going to cut his head off.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You just read this section for me. So absolutely, no, it was absolute confidence that David had. Even when he was being verbally assaulted, a lot of people would probably cower down when they get up there. You have a lot of confidence till you get in the situation, and that's when like I said today, fight or flight kicks in. We figure out who's going to stick around and who's going to run.
But with this, Chris, it says this day the Lord will deliver you. He gave all the credit to God.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, that's right. That is right. And that's another thing to as you say that, we talked about training just a little bit ago with the equipment and with the weaponry, but there's also just a mentality training is the reason that we train so much is, can you handle the stress? Can you, keep it turned on? And he didn't have a whole lot of that official training. He had what he had done with the flock. and the wild animals. But this was confident instilled by God. That's exactly what this is. And he ran toward the giant, was not timid, not fearful, did not hesitate approaching the monster. So, absolutely, he was extremely confident and gave all of the credit to God, even before he took care of the situation. When he was being insulted and he was being threatened, he even let Goliath know, here's what's fixing to happen, and here's why, and here's where it's coming from. All right. Anything else on David and Goliath? Any final categories of thought? Okay. So now let's switch over to David's mighty men. As we continue talking about David the soldier. Of course, 1 Samuel chapter 22 and 2 Samuel 23. Initial thoughts on the mighty men, anybody? Uriah was one of the mighty men.
Which I think compounds the heinousness of David's sin against him.
Okay.
Consider the loyalty of the mighty man, Uriah being one of those men who were, and I don't know how far you're going to go, but he just mentioned he missed the waters or wherever, so they went through enemy line to go get that water for him. I mean, that shows the loyalty they have. Uriah was one of those individuals. So to me, it compounds the betrayal on David's part, which illustrates just how low that point in David's life really was, and where his mind was to get to that point.
Very good. So Uriah was one of the mighty men. And so Josh's point is it magnifies how low that sin was with Uriah later on. That he was one of the trusted few. He was one of the inner circle to David. And then you keep that in mind later when we get to that point.
And Uriah's actions are consistent with it. When he felt guilty and wouldn't even go into his wife or
Right.
slept on the porch, to me, that's an embodiment of that mentality.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Say again.
He was listed last in the list.
Okay. Uriah was listed last in the mighty men. Okay.
The meeting, 37 in all, was 37 of them. Before you leave the Goliath,
Go ahead.
I thought it was really interesting in, at the end after he had severed his head, he goes on and talks about what he's gonna do to the Philistines in the 47th verse of 17. And that all this assembly may know that the Lord serves not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. I thought that was always an interesting closing out of that episode. He gave the glory to God.
He did. He did.
At the very start of this, he could not believe that they would let this giant talk about their God, like his God.
Yes.
would talk about his God like
Absolutely. He was very insulted by the threats that were being made. Absolutely. And that's a good point that you make right there, that all of this assembly may know the Lord saves not with sword or spear. I mean, that was how battles were won. That was what everybody knew. And so, you know, David comes in with God and wins with a stone. You know, compare that to today's time, and not so much in weaponry, but just in general. How do we feel confident in what we're doing every day, or the battles we face that, you know, well, I need this or I need that, but God comes in a different way and solves a problem we're facing. You know, there's probably many examples that something was taken care of in a different way than we ever saw was going to come through. It goes back to what I talk about all the time of our plan and our timing versus God's plan. And so that, obviously, he gives that credit to God and that faith, but, you know, that this situation was handled in a completely unorthodox way by human standards at that time. You know, with a sling and a rock, compared to armor and swords and spears and shields.
Well, David knew physically that he didn't have a chance, you know, to go up there and basically body slam Goliath, you know,
Right.
stab him or whatever.
Wasn't going to be hand-to-hand combat.
Head, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and he says, you know, here's what I've got that I can get at a distance where he can't get his hands on me.
Absolutely.
And laying, so I mean, he either God had put that thought in his mind, or he did some pretty good thinking about it before he attacked Goliath.
Sure. Absolutely.
Like the old saying, don't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah. Don't judge a book by its cover. Absolutely. We don't know, you know, what anybody's capable of. That's right.
What do you think David looked like physically? I mean, I can remember back when I was a kid and heard this story. Y'all think about this little old skinny kid, black-headed, you know? But it says that, you know, it says he's ruddy, and there's a lot of the ruddy type people that they're kind of short in stature, but they're also you know, they got
Okay.
muscular, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, so I guess what I'm getting at is what do you have in your mind in terms of how he looks physically?
I've probably always had the same
But
image that you gave first, that young, scrawnier type kid.
he killed all those wild animals. He had to have some strength.
He probably did. Now I think we all know people who are more capable and stronger than they appear to be. You know, I've come across a lot of people who weren't just the biggest, bulkiest, leanest, you know, physically fit looking person that but their capabilities were pretty outstanding. So, but yeah, he probably was not as scrawny as we've probably always imagined him to be.
that. Had beautiful eyes,
Beautiful eyes.
he was handsome.
Saul was a big man in
Yep.
comparison to everyone else.
Yeah.
And that thought of, he hadn't tried, the armor was custom fitted to the person.
Mhm.
And so for Saul to think that, I'll be honest with you, if I had my armor and Gunnar was gonna go do it, I'm
Yeah.
not gonna think to myself, hey, I'm gonna give this kid my armor.
Sure.
You know?
Absolutely.
And so there had to be at least some girth to him, to the point that Saul thought maybe my armor will be beneficial
Right.
to him.
Absolutely.
So I think personally, he was probably a little, probably not as tall as Saul. They think Saul was in the 6'4" range. He probably wasn't as tall, but, I think he was probably, I don't think he was a lanky kid. I think he was probably more stout,
Okay.
more of a soldier look.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't really in the battle because of his age.
Okay.
I don't think it was physical makeup that kept him from being in the army. I think it was his age that kept him from being in the army. So for Saul to give him his armor,
Okay? So probably more stature than we've historically thought.
Changing the subject, but how do we apply this to us today? Is the big bad world out there, and we've got so many soldiers that are afraid to face it? Or have we got some soldiers who've got slings and 5 stones?
I would hope that the ones that are sitting here today would be are the ones with 5 stones. But we have to armor ourselves with the Word of God and continually study it to be able to do that.
What's your answer first?
Sir,
What's your answer to your question?
I have a question. I think the answer is God's will be done. You can be on the winning side or the losing side.
Yeah, you know, obviously to me, faith comes into this first and foremost. You know, that's number one. Two, I like what we've said where he ended this, that God took care of this situation, and he took care of it in a manner that was not typical of a battle. You know, so I do like that note that Kelly pointed out. Sometimes we may face some situations in this world today that God's going to take care of, but it may get taken care of in a way that's not what we expected. And I don't have a good example off the top of my head for that.
Well, we have to be prepared.
We do. We do have to be prepared, but maybe not. Sometimes I think we try to stay too much in control with that preparation. Can we go too far with the preparation? And I know that sounds bad. I know. I'm trying to find a way to say it. Too rigid in our preparation and not flexible when that, like I say, our plan of how this is going to go is probably not the way it's going to go. And if we let God be in control, does it get taken care of in a way that, oh, I didn't think about that. I wouldn't have approached it that way.
And it goes back to what you said, faith.
It is faith. That's absolutely. And that's where I'm getting, that's where I'm coming from on me not being in control and letting God be in control of it.
It's your relationship.
It is. It is.
with God,
Absolutely.
Jesus Christ. It's your relationship. And you've got, if your relationship is at that point, you're going to say, your will be done.
Yeah.
And so that's where new things come into view.
Absolutely.
When you let God turn loose and let God do it.
Yeah.
It's, we're so much more, we're from Missouri, we're gonna do it our way, and, you know,
Yeah.
we're strong, we make decisions in the United States.
That's right.
Everybody can make decisions, everybody makes good decisions.
Let's start there next week. Let's keep that thought that Larry just asked about, and think about that this week of how this applies to today, and our situations and solving problems, where we want to look at that from.
God had been prepared David.
He had. That's right.
He prepared him with it. He, number one, he was filled with the Spirit.
Yep.
Number two, he fought lions and bears and did all
Yep.
this stuff out in the outdoors. He knew God was going to take
That's right.
care of him. He
And-
didn't have a doubt, wasn't a doubt in his mind.
Absolutely.
God had prepared him.
That's right.
He prepares us.
Yes.